Beyond the rubble, love and liberation. In post-war Germany, the ashes of the Third Reich. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23. Berlin, May 1945. The city that once proclaimed itself the capital of a thousand-year Reich lay in ruins. Smoke still rose from collapsed buildings. The acrid smell of death hung in the air. Amid the rubble, German civilians emerged from cellars and bomb shelters, blinking at the harsh sunlight of defeat. Greta Miller, 23 years old, stepped carefully through the debris-strewn streets, clutching her younger sister Anna's hand. Their once elegant apartment building was now a skeleton of twisted metal and shattered concrete. Their father had died on the Eastern Front and their mother had perished in the firebombing of Dresden. They were alone. "Greta, I'm hungry," Anna whispered, her 10-year-old face gaunt and pale. "I know, Liebling," Greta replied, fighting back tears. "We'll find something." But there was nothing. Berlin's infrastructure had collapsed. No food distribution. No running water. No electricity. No gas. The German population, 90% women, children, and elderly men, faced starvation. The Wehrmacht had been annihilated. Of the approximately 18 million German men who served in the military, nearly 5 million were dead, 2 million were missing, and millions more were prisoners of war in Allied or Soviet camps. German cities were populated almost entirely by women and children. Then came the Liberators, the arrival of the Americans. The Western Allies, American, British, and French forces occupied the western zones of Germany. The Soviets took the east. The difference between the two occupations would prove stark and significant. Sergeant James "Jimmy" Washington, a 25-year-old African-American from Alabama, rolled into Berlin with the 18th Engineer Combat Battalion in June 1945. He had survived the Normandy landings, the Battle of the Bulge, and the final push into Germany. Now the war was over. "Would you look at this place?" said his friend, Corporal Robert Jackson, surveying the devastation. "They brought this on themselves." Jimmy nodded slowly. The Nazi regime had preached Aryan supremacy and murdered 6 million Jews, along with millions of others deemed inferior. They had started a war that killed over 60 million people worldwide. The ruins around them were testament to the consequences of that evil. Yet as Jimmy looked at the German civilians, hollow-eyed women, malnourished children, traumatized elderly, he saw suffering humanity. Not monsters, not the caricatures of Nazi propaganda. Just people, broken and desperate. "Yeah," Jimmy replied quietly, "but these folks here, most of them were just trying to survive." The African-American troops of the segregated U.S. Army represented an ironic twist of history. Black soldiers, who faced discrimination, segregation, and violence in their own country, had been sent to liberate Europe from a racist regime. They had fought bravely, died courageously, and now occupied the remnants of Hitler's failed racial empire. The meeting 3 days later, Jimmy's unit was assigned to distribute food rations in a residential district. Long lines of German women and children waited patiently, hunger etched on their faces. That's when Jimmy first saw Greta. She stood near the back of the line, holding Anna close, her blonde hair dirty and matted, her blue eyes wary but dignified. Even in rags, even starving, she carried herself with quiet strength. When she reached the distribution point, Jimmy handed her 2 ration packages, one for her, one for the child. "Danke schön," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're welcome, ma'am," Jimmy replied, tipping his helmet slightly. Their eyes met for just a moment. In that brief exchange, something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two human beings from opposite sides of an apocalyptic war, acknowledging each other's humanity. Greta hurried away, clutching the precious food, but she glanced back once. Jimmy was still watching. If you want to understand the real human stories behind World War II history, subscribe and hit the like button. This is just the beginning of an extraordinary story. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Galatians 3:28. Jimmy Washington had grown up in the Jim Crow South, where racial segregation was not just practice but law. He couldn't eat at white restaurants, couldn't use white bathrooms, couldn't attend white school. He had seen his uncle lynched for the crime of looking at a white woman. The U.S. Army was segregated. Black soldiers served in separate units, usually assigned to labor and support roles rather than combat. When they did fight, their bravery was often unacknowledged. The famous Tuskegee Airmen, the 7061st Tank Battalion Black Panthers, and other African American combat units, had proven their courage repeatedly, yet still faced discrimination from their own military. "It's crazy, isn't it?" Robert said one evening as they shared cigarettes. "We fought the Nazis for being racist bastards, but back home we can't even vote in some states." "Double victory," Jimmy replied, referencing the African American campaign for victory against fascism abroad and racism at home. "We're still fighting for the second." Yet in defeated Germany, something unexpected happened. The paradox of occupation. German civilians, especially women, noticed something remarkable about the African American soldiers. They were unlike the Soviet troops in the East, who committed widespread atrocities. An estimated 2 million German women were sexually assaulted by Red Army soldiers. The Western Allied forces generally maintained discipline, and among the Western Allies, the African American troops developed a particular reputation for courtesy, gentleness, and respect toward German civilians. Why? Several factors converged. Shared experience of oppression. Many African American soldiers recognized their own experiences in the faces of the defeated Germans. They understood what it meant to be degraded, to be treated as less than human, to suffer under a system that denied your basic dignity. This empathy didn't excuse Nazi crimes. Nothing could, but it allowed black soldiers to see German civilians as individuals, not as an enemy monolith. Absence of propaganda's grip. White American soldiers had been raised on Nazi propaganda about Aryan superiority and had witnessed the horrors of concentration camps, creating understandable rage toward German. Black soldiers had experienced racial superiority ideology firsthand in America, and were perhaps less susceptible to dehumanizing entire populations. 3. Basic human decency. Many African American soldiers simply chose to treat people with the dignity they themselves had been denied. Having suffered racism, they refused to perpetuate it. 4. Military discipline. African American units, knowing they were under extra scrutiny, often maintained higher behavioral standards to avoid giving racist critics ammunition. Developing connection. Over the following weeks, Jimmy's engineering battalion worked on rebuilding infrastructure. They repaired roads, cleared rubble, restored water systems. The work brought them into constant contact with German civilians. Greta and Anna were living in a partially destroyed building with a dozen other families. They had almost nothing. Each day was a struggle for survival. One afternoon, Jimmy's unit was clearing debris near their shelter. Anna, fascinated by the American soldiers, approached timidly. "Hello," she said in careful English, taught by Greta from an old textbook. "Well, hello there, young lady," Jimmy replied, smiling. "What's your name?" "Anna. I am 10 years old." Jimmy reached into his pocket and pulled out a chocolate bar, part of his rations. Anna's eyes wide. She hadn't seen chocolate in years. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "For you." Anna looked back at Greta, who stood at the doorway uncertain. Greta nodded slightly. Anna took the chocolate with trembling hands, whispered "Danke," and ran back to her sister. From that day, a tentative connection formed. Jimmy would bring extra rations when he could: bread, canned meat, powdered milk. In return, Greta began teaching him German phrases. Anna taught him German songs. "Why are you so kind to us?" Greta asked one day, her English improving. After everything Germany did, Jimmy considered the question carefully. "My grandmother used to say, hating someone doesn't hurt them, it hurts you. You didn't start this war, you're just trying to survive it." "But I was part of it," Greta said quietly. "We all were. I believed the propaganda for a while. I thought Hitler would make Germany strong again. I was blind. The Bible says all have sinned and fall short," Jimmy replied. "None of us are perfect. What matters is what we do now." This story challenges everything you thought you knew about post-war Germany. Drop a like and comment below with your thoughts. Were you taught this history in school? Over the months, as Germany began the long, painful process of reconstruction, relationships developed between occupation forces and German civilians. Some were transactional, desperate women trading companionship for food and protection, but many were genuine human connections formed in the aftermath of catastrophe. The German man question: where were the German men? Dead, over 5 million killed in combat or bombing, captured, millions in POW, some not returning until the 1950s, traumatized. Those who did return often came back physically or psychologically broken, ideologically tainted. Many remaining men had been Nazi Party members, SS officers, or war criminals, creating moral complications. The few German men who had survived and returned faced a devastated homeland, economic collapse, and profound psychological trauma. Many were unable to provide for families. Some turned to alcohol or violence. Others simply shut down emotionally. Into this vacuum stepped the occupation forces, well-fed, employed, supplied with resources, and representing the victorious powers. Greta's dilemma. By autumn 1945, Greta faced a choice that thousands of German women confronted. A distant cousin, Hans, had returned from a POW camp. He was 38, gaunt, missing 2 fingers from frostbite suffered on the Eastern Front. He had been a fervent Nazi, a Wehrmacht officer who had participated in the invasion of Poland and France. Hans proposed to Greta. It was practical, not romantic. She needed protection and provision. He needed a wife to rebuild some semblance of normal life. It's what's expected, Greta's elderly aunt insisted. He's German, he's one of us. These Americans will leave eventually. But Greta had also grown close to Jimmy, not just because he brought food, though that mattered, not just because he represented safety, though that mattered too, but because he treated her with a respect and kindness she hadn't experienced from German men. Even before the war, Jimmy listened when she talked. He asked about her dreams, her thoughts, her feelings. He made her laugh, something she thought she'd forgotten how to do. He played games with Anna, making the girl giggle with delight. He never demanded anything, never expected anything, never took anything. One evening, as they sat on the rubble watching sunset paint the ruins gold and crimson, Jimmy spoke quietly. Greta, I want you to know, I care about you. A lot, but I'm going to be transferred soon, probably back to the States, and I don't know what that means for. He gestured vaguely between them. Greta was silent for a long moment. In America, what would happen to me, to us? Jimmy's face darkened. I won't lie to you, it would be hard, real hard. Interracial marriage is illegal in most states. You'd face hatred, both for being German, and for being with a black man. My own family might not accept you. And here, Greta asked, here you'd be called a nigger hooer, a racial slur for women who associated with black men, shunned, possibly attacked. Hans and men like him would see you as a traitor, so there is no good choice, Greta said bitterly. There's one choice, Jimmy replied, the true one, the one your heart makes, regardless of consequences, but it has to be yours. I won't pressure you. The biblical parallel, where you go I will go, and where you stay I will stay. Your people will be my people and your God my God. Ruth 1:16. That night, Greta remembered the story of Ruth from the Bible which her mother had read to her as a child. Ruth, a Moabite woman, chose to follow her Israelite mother-in-law Naomi, leaving her own people and embracing a foreign nation and foreign God. It was a choice of love over convenience, principle over prejudice. Greta realized that the Nazi propaganda she had believed about racial purity, about Aryan supremacy, about the inferiority of other peoples was exactly the kind of hatred that had destroyed Germany, the very ideology that had killed millions, including members of her own family in the war's carnage. Jimmy, the man her former Führer would have deemed Untermensch, subhuman, had shown her more humanity than the regime that claimed to represent the highest civilization. The next day she gave Hans her answer, no. 3 days later she told Jimmy, if you'll have us, me and Anna, we'll go with you, wherever that is. Jimmy's eyes filled with tears. Are you sure? Really sure? I'm sure, Greta replied. You've shown me what love actually is. Not power or domination or racial superiority, just kindness. respect, seeing someone as they truly are. This story is about courage in the face of prejudice from all sides. If this moved you, subscribe to hear more untold stories from history. Chapter 4, The Aftermath and the Legacy. The statistics: between 1945 and 1950, thousands of relationships developed between African American soldiers and German women. Exact numbers are difficult to determine, but estimates suggest 5,000 marriages between Black American soldiers and German women, tens of thousands of brown babies, mixed-race children born of these unions, significant social consequences, in both Germany and America. For context, these relationships were occurring against a backdrop of anti-miscegenation laws in 30 U.S. states, prohibiting interracial marriage, German social stigma against fraternization with occupiers, particular hostility toward relationships crossing racial lines, violent reprisals in some cases. Why German women chose Black liberators. The title's provocative question deserves a nuanced answer. Survival and pragmatism. Post-war Germany faced severe food shortages, average caloric intake, 1,050,000 clues needed, collapsed economy, Reichsmark was worthless, destroyed infrastructure, absence of German men, with millions dead, captured or incapacitated. The male-to-female ratio was dramatically skewed. Many women faced the prospect of never marrying or having families, unless they looked beyond the decimated German male population. 3. Trauma and Nazi disillusionment. German women had experienced Nazi indoctrination that ultimately led to catastrophic defeat, loss of fathers, brothers, husbands to Hitler's war, Soviet atrocities in eastern zones, profound questioning of everything they'd been taught. Many rejected Nazi ideology, including racial ideology, after witnessing its consequences. Black soldiers' kindness contradicted propaganda about racial inferiority. Genuine connection. Beyond survival calculations and social factors, many relationships were simply authentic human connections. Love, companionship, mutual respect and shared humanity transcended the barriers of race and nationality. Jimmy and Greta's relationship represented all these factors, but at its core it was love. The journey to America. In 1946, Jimmy was transferred back to the United States. The process of bringing Greta and Anna took another year. Paperwork, military authorization, immigration procedure. Finally, in 1947 they arrived in New York, then traveled to Jimmy's hometown in Alabama. The reception was hostile. White neighbors refused to speak to them. The local sheriff warned Jimmy that trouble would come if he didn't keep that German girl away from decent folk. Even some Black community members were suspicious. After all, Greta was German, from the nation that had allied with America's enemies. But Jimmy's grandmother, Sarah, a woman of deep Christian faith and deeper wisdom, welcomed them. The Lord said, "Love your neighbor," Sarah declared. He didn't say love your neighbor only if they're the same color or from the same country. He said, love, period. It was hard. Greta faced discrimination from multiple angles: for being German, for being in an interracial marriage, for speaking with an accent. Anna struggled in school. Jimmy faced increased racism, now compounded by having a white wife, but they persevered. Jimmy used his military benefits to attend college and became a teacher. Greta learned English fluently, became a nurse, and worked with veterans suffering from PTSD, understanding trauma intimately from her own experience. Anna graduated high school, then college, becoming one of the first mixed-race students in her university. The broader legacy. The relationships between Black American soldiers and German women had profound historical impacts. One, challenging segregation. These marriages became test cases for anti-miscegenation law. The military's acceptance of such marriages, however grudging, created precedent that helped undermine legal segregation. Civil rights movement. Many Black veterans, having experienced relative equality abroad, and having relationships that crossed racial lines, returned to America less willing to accept Jim Crow. They became active in the emerging civil rights movement. Cultural exchange. German war brides brought European perspectives to African American communities. Their children, mixed-race brown babies, navigated complex identities that helped pave the way for broader conversations about race and identity. Dehumanization.
In small but significant ways, these relationships helped both Germans and Americans see beyond propaganda and prejudice to recognize shared humanity. Epilogue, 1995, Jimmy and Greta, both in their 70s, sat on the porch of their modest Alabama home. They had been married for 48 years. Anna, now a grandmother herself, visited with her children and grandchildren, a beautiful tapestry of cultures, colors, and backgrounds. Do you regret it? Jimmy asked Greta, as he had many times over the decades. All the hardship, the prejudice. Greta took his weathered hand in hers. Never, she said firmly. You gave me something the 1,000-year Reich never could. Freedom, real freedom. Not freedom to conquer, but freedom to love, freedom to be human. She looked at their mixed-race grandchildren playing in the yard, and look what that freedom created. Beauty from ashes, hope from despair, love from hate. Jimmy smiled. The Bible got it right. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. I'd add neither black nor white, German nor American. We're all just people. Just people, Greta agreed. That's all we ever were. The answer to why. Why did German women choose black American liberators? Because in the ruins of the most destructive war in history, in the aftermath of the most evil racial ideology ever conceived, they found something unexpected: humanity. They found kindness where they expected hatred. They found respect where they expected exploitation. They found love where they expected only survival. The question itself, why would they choose, reveals the prejudice it challenges. It assumes racial hierarchy. It assumes that being with a black man is somehow lesser than being with a white man. The women who made this choice rejected that premise. They chose individual human beings over collective prejudices. They chose love over convenience. They chose humanity over ideology. And in doing so, they helped write a chapter of history that challenges us still. What if we saw people as people rather than as categories? What if we chose connection over division? That was the real liberation, not just from Nazi tyranny, but from the racial hatred that enabled. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. 1 Corinthians 13. This untold story challenges comfortable narratives and reveals uncomfortable truths on all sides. If you want more real history that makes you think, subscribe, like, and comment with your thoughts. What other hidden WW2 stories should I tell? See you in the next video.